Before we get this video started, can I just say something real quick? The reason I didn't post last weekend, why is that? I really don't know actually. I got through something going on. It was a long weekend. I couldn't get time through. I didn't know what I was gonna make, but so I'm uploading this weekend. So be happy I'm still uploading. You thought I was not gonna upload anymore. You thought the reason I stopped uploading was because I'm done. Oh, don't worry, I'm not done just yet. I'm still uploading, so be happy. Let's get through this list. Do we all want to talk about what year we all adore the most? Because I know many years that I enjoy the most. The one thing I do want to mention about those years is how the years work in the terms of the movies that I've seen from those years. Because of course I'm going to do it. Of course I'm going to be ranking them off the movies. So this list, I am going to be counting down 10 of my favorite movie years ever. These are going to be 10 years that I just enjoy seeing of their films the most. To the 10 years of movies that I enjoy. This is going to be a top 10 list on my all-time favorite years of the movies that came out. And of course, this list will be ranked off of the movies that came out that year, not by I don't know how I existed, because some of these are probably going to be years where I didn't exist yet. That being said, I guess we might as well just get this list started. I think you could understand what I'm going with. So, let's get started. 2008. 2008 was a year that movies got a much more interesting type of gimmick. It was kind of like the year where movies were about to reach the future of what we could see in the next decade. As this year introduced movies that really did leave a huge impact on us for what we could expect on the next decade. The best movie I could consider this year would be The Dark Knight, of course. That being the Batman film that what felt the most dark, the most gruesome, the most cool, had the best choice of characters. That movie was the best of this year. Any other films I can consider to have worked pretty well for this year would be movies for their animation like WALL-E, movies to start something big like Iron Man starring the MCU. There's overall just something this year had that a lot of other years from the decade wouldn't possibly have. As this one again is just going to tell us that we're going to be expecting something huge in the next decade. The movies are going to look this more modern, as almost every movie that came out this year just looked like something that would come out of the 2010s. And that's good because this is 2008. Because all the movies that came out this year, most of the movies that came out this year really did mean something. Yeah, there might have been some bad ones, but mostly good ones. That's why it's on this list. They're mostly good ones. Like I said, there's The Dark Knight, which is a classic. There's all of these films that left a huge impact on what I could expect for the next generation of movies that could have already have happened by this point. 2010. Alright, let's get to the year that it did start. 2010. The year that cinema did finally make its big break into the modern future. This year introduced, again, more advanced films. Movies that we could expect to see create something big in the future. My favorite one of this year is oddly just going to be Toy Story 3. That one was the third and what we could say final film of the Toy Story franchise. Don't know what I can say about the fourth one, but yeah, that movie was my favorite. It was because, it was Toy Story. I just have a love for that series, and that was my favorite one of this year. But there were other ones good that came out this year too. Like Inception, for example. That being one of Christopher Nolan's finest films after the Batman trilogy. There's other good movies like Shutter Island. There's a lot of things that came out this year that, again, are just going to tell us we have a big future ahead of us in the movie industry. How much more advanced these movies can get. So that's what this year gave us. More advanced movies. It gave us movies that I think we all can agree could make this the best decade of the 2010s. So is it the best decade of this overall? Is 2010 the best year of the entire decade? We'll have to see, because this was still going. 1984. Here's a year that I didn't exist in yet. However, just because I never existed in 1984 doesn't mean I still enjoy 1984. This year brought so many interesting ideas to the movie industry. The year introduced fine prints like, say, The Terminator, for example. That was a really cool film. My favorite movie to come out this year, I think I'll admit, would be Ghostbusters. We all heard me talk about that movie, Ghostbusters. It's a fun comedy action film. But after Ghostbusters, there are some other great movies this year I had to offer as well. Like I said, Terminator, for example. That one definitely was iconic in many ways. So yeah, the many movies that came out this year really did give us something that we were ready to see for more 80s films. So this is just one of those years that make me know how much I enjoy the 80s. There's other years too. I mean, I can't tell you that there isn't more on this list from the 80s. But what I can say is, for what we have now, 1984 created a lot of fun films, each having a good meaning to this decade. Because yeah, like I said, the 80s is my favorite decade of cinema ever. Could even possibly be my favorite decade of all time, even though I never existed in it yet. If someone ever built a time machine for me, go ahead and let me travel back here. I just want to see what this all was like, because I'm pretty sure I could be interested in it. 1985. Yep. Another 80s year. Right after 84, we have 85. 1985 gave us more great movies. Those having more cool impact on the 80s film industry. My favorite one of this year definitely would be Back to the Future. I mean, that should be everyone's favorite, right? But there are also other movies from this decade that have big meaning too. Back to the Future is a great movie. It's huge, so great that even outside of 1985, even for the overall 80s, this movie is incredible. Regardless, for 1985, Back to the Future is a lot of fun, and it's the one movie that comes to my mind when I think of this year. There's other great movies too. There's The Goonies, there's The Breakfast Club. There's movies that you could really find to be a fine film for the decade. The decade just gives us movies that we can really feel are very iconic. And for this year, I think comes for the most iconic of 80s films. So is this my favorite decade? Well, yes. I said it wrong. Is this my favorite year of the decade? We'll just have to see. If not, if there aren't any other on this list, then yes, it is. But if there are something on this list, then I'm sorry. This is just gonna have to go. 2017. Okay, so there's actually other great years from the 2010s outside of the 2010. Then when I said, could 2010 be the best year of this decade? I guess not. There are other great movies too. 2017 opened the door to a lot of other great movies as well. I think my favorite out of the many movies I've seen would be Spider-Man Homecoming, the first single Spider-Man movie of the MCU, which for a Spider-Man fan like me is pretty great. But other movies were great too. This movie opened very fine movies that you could really expect to see look much cooler as time goes on. And as you look back at these movies, you can see something that you know was from 2010s. I seem to look back at this year as great, not just in the movie industry, but in my overall industry. Even though I did say this isn't going to be based off of my overall life, it's just based off the movies, I still have fun looking back at 2017 for my life. So yeah, this year is great, not just for its movies, but for pretty much my entire life. So yeah, that's the thing. I turned 12 this year, which is nice. As I turned 12, I was able to look back at more of these films. Not all of them, but a good chunk of them, and I enjoyed the ones I seen, so that's good. 2001. This year, I will admit, outside of the film industry, for the overall industry as it overall was, may have not have been too nice. I mean, we all know one thing that year gave us that we all don't want to remember, so I'm not going to say it. But what I can say is that for movies, this year was pretty nice. This movie gave us fine movies. My favorite one, as you probably already know, The Lord of the Rings. This is one of my favorite trilogies ever. And the first one in the trilogy, it came out this year, which I still really enjoy. And like you know, all these movies that come out this year are becoming a 20-year-old icon this year. Like Lord of the Rings is turning 20 years old in its movie industry. Or Shrek is turning 20. The Harry Potter films are turning 20. This year is just going to give us 20-year-old movies. So yeah, it's been 20 years old ever since a lot of stuff that came out that happened this year happened. But I look back at it all and I don't complain. Because all of these movies really are something that I enjoy. It may have not have been a fine year overall, but when you look at movies that year, I just see some great films. I just see some great ideas that I'm just really interested in for time being. So, yeah, I love this year for the movies that it produced. 2003. But of course, despite how nice 2001 would be, 2003 is nicer. Why? Well, because I guess it just overall had better films. There were movies like The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, the final film in the trilogy, which is my favorite of this entire year, and of course my favorite in the entire trilogy. I just can't get enough of it. Dear God, this movie is so good. But it also produced other fine movies. Some could be beginners of a franchise. Others could be conclusions to a franchise. This year gave us introduction to, I don't know, like Pirates of the Caribbean. That's a franchise now. But for everything I saw this year, really did interest me. I can really find a good thing to look at. Like when I think of this movie, I think of it coming out this year. When I think of Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, I know when it came out. And that's just what inspires me. So when I think of the year 2003, I think of the movies that came out that year that I really enjoy. Like Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. I can't stop talking about this. Help me, dear God. It's so much to admire for all these films. So hopefully as I see more movies, I can have more fun with the year. But if I don't see any more movies to have fun with the year, then I guess this year's probably just going to lose all the inspiration that I said I enjoy from it. Who knows? 2015. Look, here's another year of the 2010s. So yeah, this is kind of weird that I'm just including every year from this decade. Because I guess probably because I exist, this is my first full decade. And, you know, there's a lot of movies that come out I can talk about. But, yeah, that's the thing. So, there you go. 2015 had great movies to come out that year. This year gave us such fine films. I think my favorite would be the Star Wars movie, The Force Awakens. And a lot of you are saying, oh God, how dare you like that trilogy? Well, guess what? I like the trilogy. And you can't stop me. So, just try and stop me. I like the trilogy. But outside of The Force Awakens, which I still love, don't be rude to me, please. The year introduced other movies that could mean something. It gave us more Marvel films, like Ant-Man or Age of Ultron. I actually didn't really like Age of Ultron, but Ant-Man, that was good. Or Pixar coming back with Inside Out, a movie that definitely was way better than I could have thought of. A lot of things we see from this year are things that, I don't know, make the decade overall feel fun. Because it's the middle of the decade. And what's even crazier is that if you were born this year, I think you're like 6 years old now. Which is crazy. I can't believe that I'm talking to 6-year-olds from this year. Regardless,
2015 was a lot of fun. So is this my favorite year of the decade? Well, I just have to see. I guess not. I guess not. We're just at 2019 now. Yes, 2019, the final year of the decade, before we got into this decade, which kind of didn't start out as well. 2019 introduced a lot of fun stuff, and I really just feel like I have too much to talk about with this year. This year gave us movies like Avengers Endgame, which is one of my favorites ever. It gave us the final film in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, which I also enjoy. Yes, I enjoy Rise of Skywalker. I don't care what you think, I enjoy it. There's Joker, which was nice. There's a lot of movies this year had that I honestly couldn't find of. Probably because I was 14 when this was out, and the older I am in the year, the more movies I can see that year, and the more I can talk about them, which probably was the case. But 2019 is just that good, and I really do enjoy what 2019 had. All of its movies I was able to watch. They were all watchable. The ones that were bad, I guess, could not be good, but the ones that were good were really fun. So, I guess it was kind of upsetting how when this year ended, the next year wasn't superior. But at least we can look back at this year and maybe look back at more movies that we haven't seen yet. Because that's what I'm going to do. There are actually some films I haven't seen yet from this year that a lot of people love. So I'll go ahead and look at those soon. But let's get to the number one favorite year of film I can consider. Is it another year of this decade? No, it's the 90s. With the 90s, there's a lot that I can enjoy. I have not talked about any movie that came out in the 90s yet on this list. So I guess now is my chance to talk about the 90s with the one year of this decade that's my all-time favorite from the overall industry of years that movies released. 1994. 1994 was the year where I got to see movies like Forrest Gump. There were movies like Pulp Fiction, The Lion King, Shawshank. It's not just my personal opinion to what every great movie that came out this year had. It's to everyone else. I feel like this year has been considered everyone else's favorites. Don't be rude to me if I was wrong if you have another favorite year, but I just feel like this year offered the most great movies out of any other year out there. It just had the most interesting and fun films that any other year could have had. Because this year is unlike the 90s year to all of the great movies I can remember. It's not one of my favorite, the 90s isn't my favorite decade still, but for my all-time favorite year in movie releases, it's 1994. As this year just brought in so many great movies. I haven't even seen all of the great ones yet, so I'm going to have a lot to look forward to as I keep going. For now, every movie I have seen, I just enjoy.
So now that's over with, I guess I can go now. I'm done for this weekend, thank God. I hope next weekend I'll have time because I feel like I'm probably going to be running out of time right now, so goodbye, I guess. Man, I need to fix my life better.